Thank you. My name is Debbie Wolfson, and I'm the co-chair of the outreach for South Winnipeg Seniors Resource Council. And I'm proud to say this is our 19th event since September topic, and our last one of the season. And I'm really looking forward to our presentation and tour, I guess, today from Amanda at Hammock Marsh. I think the last time I was there was as a parent on a school trip, and that was quite a few years ago. So I was greatly looking forward to seeing all you had to offer today. So with that, I will turn you over, Amanda, to proceed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda, and I am coming to you today from Hammock Marsh. It doesn't quite look like this yet, but we are slowly starting to see things look a lot more like spring. So it sounds like spring, and yesterday and today, it's really starting to actually feel like spring. So that is very exciting. So today, one sec here. We are going on a marsh walk. Does everybody have their hiking shoes on? No sweatpants? That's fine, because we're going to be virtually taking you on the walk. But hopefully, maybe you will be inspired to come visit, because it sounds like a few of you haven't been here for a long time, or maybe haven't even been here ever. And spring is a wonderful time to come and visit the marsh. We've got lots of migrating birds that are passing through. Lots of things are waking up. It's really a really beautiful time to be here at the marsh. And so as we go through our presentation, if you do have questions, feel free to interrupt me, but I will have time for some questions at the end. I can even stop partway through if people have questions. The beautiful thing about being an interpreter is that we just kind of go with the flow. So if you have different things that you want me to focus on, you just let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to just do my own thing, and then you just tell me if you want anything else.
So can I just suggest that everybody go to speaker view so you get a full screen, as opposed to Amanda sharing her screen, because she's doing it a little differently. So everybody just go to speaker view and you'll get the full image.
If you want, you can pin me as well, and then everybody should have that either way.
Okay, I'll learn to pin. All right, I'll let you go on now.
All right, so without further ado, here is a kind of a little view, a bird's eye view, if you will, of the marsh. So you can see right here is our building, but you can also see that it really does blend in very well with the whole landscape. So it's built out of local limestone, and we have a green roof, all that kind of stuff, so that when birds are flying over, it doesn't stand out to them as somewhere that maybe a lot of people might be. It doesn't deter them from stopping here, and it basically just, it blends right in. It camouflages into the background, and that encourages those birds that want to stop by to do so and feel safe doing so. And as you'll see when we keep going, our green roof is a really great example of a place where birds definitely aren't deterred from landing and even nesting. So that's kind of fun. So the marsh, if we go back, you can see there's a lot of water, but it's more than just water. And I think that's important to think about when we think about what is a marsh, what's going on there. So first of all, what is a marsh? A marsh is a type of wetland And a wetland is exactly what it sounds like. It's wetland. So there's the two components that you need for a wetland are water and plants. And because plants need sunlight to grow, the water can't be too deep, otherwise the sunlight can't reach it. So the deepest that the water is going to get in a wetland is going to be about 2 meters, so about the height of your doorway. And it can go all the way from that 2 meters down to a puddle. It can be wet for some of the year and dry for some of the year. Wetlands are all very different, and some of them are ever changing. Most of them are actually, and water levels can rise and fall. And one of the beautiful things about wetlands is that they act like sponges. So they can actually soak up excess water and help to reduce or even eliminate flooding. So if we had more wetlands, we would be a lot happier at this time of year for sure. But a lot of wetlands get drained for development and different things like that. So we don't get to see as many benefits when we don't have as many wetlands. They can also conversely give water back in a situation of drought. But on the outsides of wetlands, those transition ecosystems are also really important for the animals that use the wetland itself. So we have lure crops that we plant here so that we keep the birds off the farmers' fields, because the birds are coming anyway. So we often have people say, oh, why are you planting lure crops? You're just pulling the birds in. They wouldn't be here otherwise, but they really would. They're coming either way. So we plant those lure crops to give the birds something to eat so that they don't destroy any potential farmer fields that are around us. So we make sure that we plant something that's ready a little bit before the farmer's fields so that they tend to go to our field rather than the farmer's field. But also just natural upland grasslands, things like that, they are also really important for nesting sites for a lot of ducks. They don't nest right on the water. They need that grassy area upland to build their nests. So there's a bit of a closer look at that green roof that we have. So you can see there. And it, like I said, it really does blend into the landscape. It really does camouflage into that natural background, which is really cool. And if you visit us, you can actually stand right there and look out on the beautiful views. Right now, they're a little less green than this, but they are still beautiful nonetheless. And they will continue to get greener over the coming weeks. Oh, and like I mentioned, there are some birds that actually will nest on the roof. So those are some smart birds, right? Because they can't get, fox and things like that can't get all the way up to eat them. So it's a safe space for them. We've got a few, there's one that's nesting right here. Right now, there's one, I think it's hard to point with this. How did Vanna White do this? Okay, it's like right here. There's a few different birds actually nesting on the roof. Usually it's geese. Sometimes we'll get killdeer as well that are nesting up there. Usually the killdeer like to nest here because there's a bit of a gravel roof. And we'll talk a little bit about killdeer eggs later on. But that's usually where they choose to go if they're gonna nest on the roof. But that's one of the harder places for the birds to nest because, of course, they do still have to get down with these tiny little goslings or whatever kind of bird it is. And a lot of times we have berms that build right up. So you can't see it as well on this side, but they're actually berms that are sort of built up. So some places the birds can just walk down. Some places they have a little jump, but from there they'd have a pretty big jump. And sometimes we have to help them. So we put them in like a little tote bin and carry them down, and mom and dad wait angrily for you at the bottom until they realize that you've actually helped them. And then they're usually pretty okay with it after that, but they do not like that. We're helping, we promise. But the Canada goose is one of the main attractions that a lot of people come here to see, is that big migration of birds in both the spring and the fall. It tends to be a little more dramatic in the fall. And so we do tend to get a little bit more visitation at that point. So we're gonna start our marsh walk. Everybody ready? Did you stretch? I don't want anybody hurting themselves, okay? All right, so if you look at the big map here, this right there is where we're gonna start, and that is our courtyard. And from the courtyard, we can head out onto the boardwalk. That's where a lot of people do their critter dipping, things like that. So let's head out on the boardwalk. Just a minute here. All right, can everybody see that boardwalk view?
Wow, it's a video.
Yeah. Don't get motion sick on me here. So you can see this is a nice summertime view. There's a nesting box there. Those are usually most oftentimes used by mallards. Another way to get the birds up off the ground in regular nesting sites, the success rate for different birds is going to be very, very low. And it can be as high as 80% when they choose a higher nesting area. Oh, there's our beautiful building blending into the landscape again. Lovely. All right. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. So, like I said, a lot of people go critter dipping. Even grown-ups can go critter dipping. We like, usually for older people, we call it invertebrate sampling. It makes it a little more scientific, but it's fun either way. So there's so many different kinds of critters that live under the water. And that's an important thing to think about when you think about all of the different animals that live at a marsh. So does anybody have any guesses? What do you think would be the ecosystem or the environment that might have the highest biodiversity in the world, the highest number of different kinds of species? Does anybody have a guess? Where do you think that would be?
Marsh.
Wetlands.
Wetlands are number 2.
Okay.
So that's a good
Swamps.
guess.
Swamps.
Second
marsh.
only to what?
Marsh.
Well, a
Swamp.
marsh is a type of wetland. Yeah.
Okay.
So wetlands, like marshes, are second in high number of biodiversity, second only to rainforests.
Oh,
So that's pretty crazy to think about. When you think about a rainforest, you think about a place that's just totally teeming with life. And then you go to a place like a marsh where a lot of people have totally dismissed them as just like gross, smelly, yuck, like let's drain them, let's make something else there. But they have the second highest biodiversity in all kinds of ecosystems. So that's pretty telling of how healthy an ecosystem is too. If it can support a really high number of different kinds of species, that it's a very stable situation as well, because when you mess with one species, possibly in an ecosystem or a food chain that only has a few different members, that food chain is going to break and fall apart a lot easier than one that is a lot more complex. And a lot of our species are teeny tiny, just living in the water. And so that is a really kind of good way to figure out how healthy your marsh or wetland is doing, as well as by doing some invertebrate sampling. So we do it for fun, but we also do it to check on the health of our wetland. We have lots of different species. We've got the water boatman, little teeny crustaceans, Daphnia, so many different things, and a lot of species that grow up to be something else. So pupa stages, larva stages, nymph stages of things like dragonflies, mosquitoes, different things like that. So one of our most noticeable flowers here at the marsh is the woods rose. Whoop, there's a stool there. And traditionally, they have been a really important part of wetlands for a long time, because before we had things like grocery stores, indigenous people and traveling people passing through places like wetlands would gather
Roses.
these guys, rose hips. Does anybody know what they are very high in? What nutrient or vitamin, I should say, they're really high in?
Vitamin C.
That's right. So they actually have pretty similar content of vitamin C. One little tiny, I keep being in the way, one little tiny rose hip, the same as like a whole orange. And so when you don't have access to fresh fruit and things throughout the winter, that's a really good way to get your vitamin C so that you don't get things like scurvy. Now, you don't want to just pop that guy in your mouth though, because I'll show you. Here we go. So if you look at this guy, this is a rose hip broken open. Can you see those little hairs on the seeds?
Wow.
Itching
powder.
There we go. Do you see those little hairs?
Yes.
So if you just pop that in your mouth raw like that, those little hairs are going to grab onto your insides. And it's going to give you something known as itchy bum. So you're going to be itchy from the inside. So do not do that. Don't eat these seeds. You will not be happy. So, but in order to get the vitamin C, you can make tea out of it. You can cook them, which takes away that itchy bum situation. So they're still able to be used to get that vitamin C. Just don't ever think it's a berry and pop it in your mouth, because you will not have a good time. All right, so let's get out of the courtyard, head out onto the trail. So now we're heading out here on Blackbird Trail. And we're gonna see a lot of different plants on our walk. So one of our most common plants that we see is Phragmites. Ooh, it's going to seed. I don't know if you saw that, but I just had like a poof. Ooh. So this is our Phragmites, giant reed grass. It can be so tall that a long time ago, when people would send their kids out to play, they would put little bells on their shoes because you could lose them in the giant reed grass. And then they would be able to hear where their kids were running around. And there, I'm going to show you just quickly, like the stalks of the plants can be used for lots of different things because they're very strong. They almost look like bamboo. Can you see that? They're like, yeah, they almost look bamboo-like. They're very strong. So they were often used for making baskets and different things like that because they're so strong. But we also have lots of other plants, lots of other flowering plants. We have, because we have so many different kinds of flowering plants, we also have a lot of pollinators that like to call marshes and other wetlands home. So when people think of pollinators, they often think of bees, but there are so many other different kinds of species like butterflies and birds as well. And so these provide important food, habitat, all those kinds of things for those animals as well. All right, carrying on our walk. We're going over to across the Muskrat Trail and over to the next part of the marsh here. And like I said, we just passed Muskrat Trail and we have a ton of muskrats here at the marsh. So has anybody ever seen a real muskrat? Yeah, some people have. Here's a little, they're very small. They're very cute. They look like mini beavers, but their tail is different. Looks more like a rat tail. So for anybody who's been to Okamic Marsh before, you'll notice that we don't have a ton of trees. And what do beavers need to live? Trees. And so we often have a couple of beavers, usually more so passing through, but we have thousands of muskrats. So because muskrats don't need wood and bark, they choose to eat and build their lodges out of cattails. So we have lots of those. Where did I just put my remote? I lost it. Here it is. So we'll see a muskrat here gnawing on a cattail root. And I don't know if you've ever tried a fresh cattail, but like if you grab one at around this time of year, maybe in a week or two, they taste very cucumbery. So he's having a nice little snack here. He's so cute.
What happens to the muskrats in winter?
So muskrats, just like beavers, they slow way down in the winter, but they don't fully hibernate. So they build their lodges so that there's a sort of above water and underwater area, so that even when there's ice, they can still swim underneath. And then they can, if they need to, get out and gather some more food, they can. But they try to store most of their food. They cache it for the winter inside of their lodge. And so if they need to become active, they can. They're not fully hibernating, like can't wake them up situation, but they conserve their energy and live inside their lodges through the winter.
So has this year been difficult because it's been so long?
I haven't noticed anything. I've seen already quite a few muskrats and seen them in the winter as well. So, I mean, I think it was hard on all animals to have such a long, cold winter, but we won't really start seeing the effects of that until we kind of get a good look at what's woken up, what's come back, all those kinds of things. But so far, I don't know of any issues with them yet. I am going to show you a cool thing here. So where did I put my? So just to give you a little idea, this is a beaver fur, and this is a muskrat fur. So they're quite a bit smaller. You can see. But they have, if you look, if you look at their fur, they have 2 layers. So you can see these long sort of guard hairs is what we call them. And then the underneath, there's that really soft. So you can see the darker, longer hairs that are sticking up, and then that really soft underlayer. And so that soft underlayer keeps them warm, and those long hairs keep them dry, wicks water away from them. And they have so many cool adaptations to living in the water. They have like special goggle eyelids, and all. They're super, super cool. All right. And we also have lots of mammals. We've had a ton of skunk spottings recently. We also get coyote. We get different kinds of weasels. So this one here is kind of what most people typically think of when they think of a weasel. It's a short-tailed weasel. But we also do get otters, we get mink, we've occasionally had a fisher. They're more foresty, but sometimes animals get lost. We had a moose a couple years ago. We're like, what are you doing here? This is not a boreal wetland. But we do occasionally get random visitors, but our regulars are kind of we get lots of skunks, coyotes. We did have a raccoon hanging out the other day. But yeah, people really like to see the otters. They're so cute and they're playing with stuff. But yeah, and we do have quite a few mink as well, but they're a little bit more secretive, so we don't see quite as much of those.
Do you get foxes?
We do, yes. Yeah, we do get fox. And especially at this time of year or in a couple of weeks, because fox love eggs. All right, carrying on our walk here. Over to the next part of the marsh here. And another really cool thing that wetlands can do for us is they can actually clean our water. So here at the marsh, we don't have any chemical water treatment. We have a 3-cell lagoon system and we control the speed that the water moves through each cell, but the final cell is full of cattails. And what cattails can do is their roots can actually suck up excess nitrogen and phosphorus. And those are 2 nutrients that when we see them in excess, they can cause things like blue-green algal blooms, like the things that we see on Lake Winnipeg. And so taking some of that excess nitrogen and phosphorus out of the water can be really beneficial. But in our lagoon system, once the water leaves that cattail pond, it's actually completely clean. So just as clean as if it had gone through chemical treatment, but it doesn't have to go through any at all. So a lot of people think of cattails as kind of the hot dog on a stick plant. A lot of people mistakenly call them bulrushes. There's some sort of like miscommunication between European bulrushes and cattails. Is like when I feel like somebody should have gotten together and just like named everything together, but it gets confusing. So bulrushes are actually a different plant here. They have like a little tassel on the end. They kind of look like a really thick green onion. And these ones are the cattails. I have it in a bag because when these ones go to seed, they do this. So we don't need that exploding all over here. But if you've ever taken one of them and grabbed them and then just like watch them just grow all those seeds, and they can be a little bit messy. But these guys are great. You'll see them planted in a lot of those new retention ponds in a lot of the new areas in Winnipeg, those sort of like generated wetlands, because they are so good at cleaning water. Another way that wetlands clean water is that there's just so many plants that the water is moving so slow that any sediment and things, it just settles down, gets stuck in the mud. So there's sort of 2 different ways that they do that filtering. Carrying on our walk here, on to the next part of the marsh. Oh, look, a duck. So we have different ducks here at Hammock Marsh. We also are the headquarters of Ducks Unlimited Canada. And so when we think about the different ducks that we see, you'll notice that some ducks can dive under the water, and some ducks just kind of sit there with their butt kind of like above the water. And we can tell the difference between those 2 kinds of ducks just by looking at them, even if they haven't dived down into the water, or even if we haven't seen their little butt up in the air. So when we look at a duck, we can tell whether it's a diver or a dabbler just by the way it looks. So when I look at this duck, it looks like it's about to tip over. Its legs are super far in the back. It's very like front heavy because that's how it dives. So it's gonna dive down like that, because you can see that those legs are really far back on the body, which allows it to propel itself down and dive to get whatever critters it's trying to eat under the water. Whereas if I grab a dabbler, its legs are very much in the middle of its body. So it's just going to tip to grab whatever is right at the top. So some very common dabblers that we have here at the marsh. We've got the northern shoveler here. Of course, the mallard, everybody knows that's our kind of most recognizable duck. And then our teals down here. And then we have our divers. So there's lots of different kinds of divers. Scops are divers, these canvas backs, redheads. So they're going to be the ones that are diving a lot. And so you're going to see those in more the deeper water of the marsh rather than the shallower water, because they're going right down. And of course, we have lots of other kinds of birds besides geese and ducks that we've talked about. So let me see. So these guys, the red poles, they just left. So they come for the winter and then they leave. We are their south for the winter. So they just left and these guys just got here. Do you know what it is? Any guesses?
Blackbirds.
Winged blackbirds. So we also have yellow-headed blackbirds here at the marsh. We have tons of different kinds of shorebirds. I love these guys. They're called American avocets. You see that they have blue legs. So cool. We've got lots of different kinds of shorebirds, including that avocet, lots of kinds of sandpipers, different things like that. We also have owls and other birds of prey. Throughout the year, in total, including all the species that just pass through, not necessarily the ones that stay here, we have almost 300 different species of birds that use the marsh.
Amanda, where do the red poles go to when they leave?
They just go up north. I'm not sure exactly how far they're all going, but I think like around Churchill area, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to look into that to be 100% sure how far north they go. But yeah, we are south for them.
And what birds do you have right now? Or coming up soon? Coming up soon?
Yeah, we've got a ton actually right now. We've got, I can't list them all because there's a ton, but there's, yeah, red-winged blackbirds, yellow-headed blackbirds, lots of different kinds of ducks. We've seen shovelers, mallards, teals, goldeneye, obviously geese. We've got swans. We've seen lots of different kinds of shorebirds already, mostly in the ditches actually, because the water is everywhere. And I saw a ruby-crowned kinglet yesterday. So some of the smaller migrating birds are starting to pass through. Tree swallows, they should be putting up our purple martin house soon. So there's quite a bit already, and that was not nearly everything that's here. But
well, thank you. That's interesting.
All right, so continuing on our walk, we've now arrived at what we call the main mound. So it's kind of a higher point at the marsh. It's a good viewpoint to look out and check out the scenery. And here is where a lot of people are familiar with because it is our ground squirrel mound as well. So we have ground squirrels at the marsh, and they're very cute, but we don't feed them because it's wild here. But well, I'll let you take a look at them. We've got Richardson's ground squirrels here. You've probably also seen, if you've been camping, like Franklin's ground squirrels. And we also have 13-line ground squirrels here. But the Richardsons are the ones that live at the main mound.
So are ground squirrels different than, oh, no, I've lost the name, prairie dogs?
Yes, they are different. Prairie dogs we have very little to no prairie dogs in Manitoba. They are found in like the Badlands of Saskatchewan is I think the closest like large population of them. And they have like little, they have, their tails are a little bit different. They're slightly different build and they have big pockets in their cheeks. So they're a little bit different. I watched last year a ground squirrel and a weasel play. Well, they weren't playing. The weasel was trying to eat it, but it looked to me like whack-a-mole. Like they were in the mound going in and out of the different holes. And like the ground squirrel would pop up in one hole and then like go down another hole. And then like the weasel would pop up and go down, and they were just like woo, going in and out of all the different holes. It was so crazy. Speaking of which, all the different holes. So they live, they actually have like a house that has special rooms. So they use one room as a toilet, and they sleep in a different place, and they store food in another place and different things like that. So they actually have different functional rooms within their little tunnel system house. And that's where they're going to hibernate, because they do a true hibernation in the winter. But it's really neat to me that they like build a house with rooms, essentially. I find that so strange when animals do like people things. Well, what we consider people things, I guess. They were doing it before we were, probably. All right, so now we just left the main mound. We're gonna go into the Willow Bluff on this beautiful boardwalk here. Sit down, take a rest. Is anyone tired? I should have asked. It's been a very hard hike. So in the Willow Bluff, of course, we see willows. And willows are a very typical transition tree from wetland to upland. They're a sort of water-loving tree, so they like to be kind of waterlogged. And we see different species of willow here at the marsh. So we do mostly see, I think sandbar willow is the most common one that we have here, but we also have a few others as well. We also, now we've talked about the birds, we've talked about the mammals, we've talked about the plants, but we also have reptiles and amphibians here. So this is going to be a pretty typical sound soon. So we're going to be hearing those kinds of things very soon. Actually, I think they're already in the warmer parts of the afternoon. We are starting to hear some frogs and toads. So that's really exciting. I always find frogs are so cool, like leopard frogs, like this guy here. Well, this is a toy one, but they can freeze solid. Like they have a special antifreeze in them that allows them to actually freeze solid, like a frogsicle. It's so crazy. And then they thaw and like hop away. I find that so crazy. That's one of the cool things. And like turtles, they bury themselves down in like underwater. And then we tell the kids that they breathe through their butts because that makes them laugh, but like they're doing like oxygen exchange with their butt. And so they're able to live through the winter and yeah, animals and their hibernation practices and things like that, I just find so crazy.
So how does the turtle get oxygen if it's under the water?
It literally gets oxygen out of the water at through its anal area, and it takes it up into its body. It's so cool. Animals do crazy things. But they have to survive Canadian winters, right? They got to do some creative things. And people always ask, do we have fish here at the marsh? We do. We have mostly in the shallower areas, it's just minnows. So we have fathead minnows and stickleback minnows. But in some of the entry areas, like where Wavy Creek comes in, things like that, we're going to have some deeper water, and then we're going to have some catfish, some jackfish, a few different things, sometimes some carp. But it's all dependent on what part of the wetland you're in. In general, I would say it's mostly minnows. We also have, so we talked about the bugs that live under the water, but we also have all of the critters that live above the water. So we talked about pollinators like butterflies, dragonflies, and then of course we have different kinds of caterpillars and other bugs that are going to be living on the ground as well. But the really cool thing about dragonflies and like mosquitoes, damselflies, mayflies, those sorts of things, is they all start their life underwater. Dragonflies can live in their underwater stage for like 2 to 7 years before they ever come up and get their wings out and live on land. And they only do that for a couple of weeks to a couple of months, but they could spend like 2 to 7 years underwater.
Is it true dragonflies eat mosquitoes?
So I get asked this all the time. So yes, dragonflies eat mosquitoes. Are they ever going to eat enough that we as people are going to notice like a big difference? Probably not, because it's not even their favorite food. So they're eating lots of different bugs. Some of them definitely are going to be mosquitoes, but you would need so many dragonflies to make like a noticeable dent where you're going to see less mosquitoes. But because they're kind of just in balance, right? Dragonflies are meant to eat them. They do it all the time. So it's not, unless you had a really big amount of dragonflies, you're not going to really see a big difference. All right, we're almost done our walk. We're back to the parking lot here. And in the parking lot, something that we see fairly often is any guesses? I gave you a hint earlier. No guesses?
Is it a ground squirrel?
No, it's a bird.
Oh, a killdeer.
Yeah. So, I'm going to stay here for a minute. So killdeer, that's one of the sounds they make. But the one that they make at me whenever I walk close to them is they just scream, basically kill deer, right? Like kill deer, kill deer, kill deer. And when they lay their eggs, they choose a gravelly spot. Remember I mentioned earlier, there was a kind of a gravel top on our garage where they like to sometimes lay their eggs. And because their eggs look like gravel, which is like not great for parking lot area. So they're like, ooh, I found just the best spot. Look at all this nice gravel. And then there's like cars and people everywhere. So we often have to rope their nests off when we notice them, but they're so hard to notice because the killdeer are always trying to lead you away from it. They're like, oh, my wing, it's broken. Come check me out. Ah, just kidding. And so you never know where their actual nests are unless you have like the best eyesight, because their eggs literally blend in so well. I don't know if I have a egg. No, I don't have an egg right now to show you, but so we did talk a little bit about our lure crops that we have, but there are other forms of management that we do at the marsh. So, you know, if you think back to a couple hundred years ago, the wetland that was here was known as St. Andrew's Bog, and it spanned all the way from the north end of Winnipeg to the edge of Lake Winnipeg. So it was huge. It was constantly drained over those 100 or so years. The next 100 or so years, it was drained for agriculture, development, roads, all those sorts of things. Remember, I mentioned a lot of people, they don't see the benefits that we know of now with marshes, like, ooh, stinky water, let's fill it in, let's drain it, let's get rid of it, not realizing that it was reducing flooding, cleaning their water, providing important habitat, all those kinds of things. And so the marsh that you see here today was regenerated from less than 1 square kilometer that was left. It was over 400 square kilometers down to less than 1. And now we have it back up to like 36 square kilometers, I think it is now. And so it's because we regenerated it, we have dikes, we control water level, we simulate floods and droughts, we do controlled burns, all those kinds of things in order to keep it as natural as possible. We're hoping that we're gonna do a controlled burn on our roof this spring. So because we have natural grasslands up there, it needs that natural cycle of fire. So that's always an interesting thing when we light the roof on fire. Needs a lot of control. But some other things that we have to deal with are invasive species. So things like carp, purple loosestrife, Canada thistle. There's lots of different things that we have to watch for and control for and remove sometimes by hand to try to keep ahead of those invasive species, because they can get to a point where they can fully take over a system. If an invasive species moves in without its natural predator, there's nothing to control it, and it can outcompete those native species and be really detrimental to that, even that really balanced food web that I was talking about, if it's wiping out multiple species from there. All right, so that brings us to the end of our wonderful walk. I hope you're not too tired, not too out of breath. It is very hot out, so I hope you brought lots of water with you. If anybody has any questions, ask away.
Wow. Okay, who's got the first question? Okay, Jerry, you have to unmute yourself or hit the space bar.
I missed the intro. How long have you worked there, Amanda?
I actually didn't even say, so that's okay.
Oh, okay.
So I worked here a little bit for one fall season as I was finishing up my undergrad degree in 2010, so like a long time ago. And then I came back in 2016, and I've been here ever since.
Cool.
Okay, Jean?
Are the prairie crocus come and gone already?
So we don't get the crocus right around the building. They're more in the farther access areas. And we actually can't even get there to look right now because the roads are in such bad condition after all the water. And we had a breach in one of our dikes. And so it was really badly flooded. So I actually can't even get out to the grassland to check.
Thanks.
So I'm not sure.
Okay, we just had a couple comments in the chat. Adele likes to just say thank you, Amanda. It was a very enjoyable presentation. And Gail said, thank you for an interesting hike. She looks forward to visiting.
Yes, we would love for everybody to come on a real hike. We have guided marsh walks every day.
How long
We usually do that same path, but then you can see everything for real.
Hey, Debbie?
how long does it take to walk around? I mean, obviously it depends on how fast you're walking, but can you walk an hour?
About,
or-
about exactly that long. We're pretty much right on track with what we did. And what I would probably talk a little bit less because there's more like visual to see. But I also just talk a lot in general. So I also talk while we walk. But yeah, it's about an hour to do that as a tour. You can do the walk in like 15 minutes probably if you're just going for like a speedy stroll, but nobody really does that here. That's not what we do. We go for nice birding pace walks. And we like to bring binoculars on our walk too. So we often stop and say like, oh, look at over there. Oh, look at over there. Let's identify this. And so it tends to still take the hour.
Okay. Oh, Jerry. Okay.
Did the record amount of snow and other moisture affect the marsh this year? That's probably
Yes.
a rhetorical question, but
Yeah, we were actually just closed off and on over the last 2 or 3 weeks because the high water levels, it created breaches in the dike, which brought water too close to the building. And it overwhelmed our sewage lift station, so we had no washrooms, and it's quite a struggle with the excess water. Luckily, marshes are pretty good at dealing with that, and it's already gone way down. But because we are a re-engineered marsh, we have to help it do some of those things that it's supposed to do. And when the dikes breach, that makes it hard.
All right. Hetty, you have your hand up?
Katie.
Edie.
Amanda, do you still have the museum there? That was the most wonderful little museum that you had.
Yes.
Still there?
Yes. So we have still the exhibit hall, the museum area. We have school groups here all the time that are using it. We have day camps that use it. The public is welcome to use it. We have a couple of new exhibits, but we have a whole set of new exhibits in our re-envisioning plan that's coming up. So over the next few years, you might see even some more new stuff. So that's really exciting.
Well, Amanda, thank you so much. That was a wonderful tour. I really appreciate